Welcome to Flowcast. I am your host, Jeremiah Washington. We're sharing stories about people changing lives in hopeful ways for the life of the world. A ministry of Dominican Sisters of Springfield, Illinois, recorded live at Sacred Heart Convent.
It's
been so long since I've done this. Welcome to Flowcast. I am the host, Jeremiah Washington. Today we have two very special guests, Sister Denise Glazik, who is in charge of vocation for the community of Dominican sisters. I'm also with Sister Mary Alberta Lawless, who is an educator, a pioneer of many schools, and a tech guru. And today we have some amazing stories to talk about with the two of them that we're about to get into.
So, I'm Sister Denise. I gave a presentation at our community days in February, and it was about the heritage of our congregation in regards to vocations. And after the presentation, Sister Mary Alberta, you came up to me to say that you had many relatives who became Springfield Dominicans. And so I was fascinated with that story and how it plays into our heritage. So I'm the youngest of 14, 7 brothers, 6 sisters, and I'm the only one in religious life. But I would like you to tell me your story about how many relatives you have that are actually Springfield Dominicans.
Well, I'm one of 5 children, 4 girls and 1 boy, and 3 of us are religious sisters. 2 Springfield Dominican sisters, and the other one is a sister of St. Clair out in New York State. So I have a brother and a sister that are married. But my heritage comes from very much further back. Way long time ago, Mr. and Mrs. Gugerty, that's Gugerty, came here from Ireland and landed in New York, and their oldest child was Annie. They had 3 more boys and a girl. She married the Gugerty, and the oldest girl married John Duffner. Now, John Duffner came here from Germany with the intention of going down to Missouri to his brother Joseph and some other family members that lived down there. But he got as far as Springfield, and when he got to Springfield, he didn't have enough money to go on, so he got a job here in Springfield. Okay. Annie was the oldest in the Gugerty family, and Annie was 13, and she left here and went to Springfield to make bandages for the soldiers at Camp Butler. And so she lived in Springfield, met John some way. I don't know how they met, but they met, and they eventually married in a few years at the cathedral, at the time St. Mary's Cathedral. She had another brother and a sister that lived to adulthood. And her sister was Mary. Her name was just Mary. But when John got married to Annie, they moved down to near Woodson, Illinois, and lived there in a house that was built from log cabins. And Augusta Mary then got familiar with the sisters in Jacksonville who had just come from Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And she joined the sisters in Jacksonville as Sister Mary Augusta. Now, the Gugertys, Mr. and Mrs. Gugerty, would be my great-grandparents. And so she would be a great-great-aunt. Sister Augusta would have been.
Okay, so that starts the Dominican sisters' heritage.
That's the Dominican sisters' heritage, okay.
The first sister.
Yeah, the first sister. Well, she was with the sisters there. When John Duffner got married to Anna, they had a large family of 9 children. Well, they really had 11, 12 children, but a couple of the boys died. So they were left with 1 boy and 9 girls. And before they left Springfield, the oldest girl was born. And then they moved down next to the Gugertys, down by Woodson. So the oldest girl was Elizabeth, and she eventually got married to John Flynn. Now, John Flynn's parents both came from Ireland, and he had 5 boys and a girl. And Elizabeth taught school in a country school, and because the school was too far away from her to walk to school to teach, she decided to live with one of the directors of the school, and that happened to be John Flynn Sr. Okay, so she lived with John Flynn Sr., and one of the third oldest boy decided he liked her, and they got married. Okay, so when Elizabeth got married to him, they had 9 children that lived. One of the older ones was named Claire, and one of the other girls was named Cecilia. And Claire and Cecilia came up to Sacred Heart Academy.
That was a Dominican sister school.
Dominican sister school, that's right. And her other sisters did too. Edith came up here too. Edith was my mother, so she was a sister of these 2 girls, and both of them joined the Dominican Sisters. So that's another generation down, but it's 2 people, okay? Edith came up here to school. She would have liked to have been a sister, but the other 2 had already come up here, and she decided she'd better wait. So she waited a little while, and she got married to Joseph Lawless. Now, in the meantime, my grandmother, Elizabeth Duffner Flynn, became a third-order tertiary because Sister Edmund talked to her about it. So she's a third-order tertiary of the Dominican Sisters here in Springfield. She would join them. So Edith and Joe got married, and they have 5 children. I'm the oldest of the 5, and after I graduated from Sacred Heart Academy, I joined the Dominican Sisters. Sister Renee was next in line. She waited a year and went to college, and then she came back and joined the Dominican Sisters. Okay? So that leaves us with Sister Augusta, Sister Edmund, Sister Maureen, Sister Mary Alberta, and Sister Renee on that family line.
And as I was looking at your family line, I noticed that most of the girls joined the Dominican Sisters when they were about 21 or 22 years old. There was only one that was 19.
Okay, Sister Edmund and Maureen, I think Sister Edmund had to wait a year because she had eczema or something. Then couldn't come right away. But I think Sister Maureen came right out of high school practically.
Oh, okay.
I think she came right out of high school. And then I know I did, and I know Sister Renee did, because I was barely 21 when I made my vows.
Okay.
Okay. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because now, as I look at the average age who are entering, they're about 28 years old.
Right.
And have had prior college experience and or work experience rather than coming straight out of high school.
But that's true. When you look back at the background of our grandparents, in my family, some of them were 13, 15, 19 years old when they got married. Mm-hmm. And started families. So all of those Irish people, I know that they were young people when they got married. When I came to the convent, there were not many things a girl could do but teach school, be a secretary, handwritten secretary, no computers at that stage of the game. You could be a nurse, but you didn't really go to college. That was not part of the offering. I was offered that if I wanted to do that rather than come to the convent, but I rejected it. That was, I think, one thing my parents thought would maybe make me wait a little bit. Maybe I'd change my mind, but I was very much concerned that this is what I wanted to do. And so I came at a very young age, I guess. I was high school, came in. I graduated in 46 from high school in June, and I came to the convent in July.
Okay. And it was my understanding, so you and then Sister Mary Renee, and then you have 2 or 3 more relatives that entered?
Right. We have some more relatives that entered. They are on my dad's side. And on my father's side, a woman whose last name was Ring, Bridget Ring, from Ireland, and Michael Lawless, Lawless, came from Ireland. He came in from New Orleans, and she came in from New York. Michael landed down near Alton in an Irish community, and at the same time the Rings landed down there. They were married and had these children, had 3 or 4 children. And they decided to buy land and it was from 13 cents an acre to like 18 cents an acre. And they bought land barely in Scott County, just outside of Morgan County, catty-corner from each other. Lawless was single, Ring was married, okay? And I do not know what Lawless did for Ring, but I know that Ring volunteered to offer one of his daughters as his wife if he wanted to marry her. So he chose the oldest daughter, which was Bridget. So they married and had 9 kids. Now, Bridget also had a sister whose name was Mary, and she would be my great aunt. One of her daughters was Mary, another Mary, and she joined the Dominican Sisters from Jacksonville into Springfield. And she was Sister Mary Rita Ring.
Okay.
Okay, so she is a first cousin once removed, I believe it is. And so, twice removed. First cousin twice removed, okay? And then one of the sons of that married couple, the Lawless Ring couple, and his name was Michael, and was James, I'm sorry, his name was James, and he was the first generation Irishman, but he married Ellen Agnes Jordan, who came here from Ireland. So that was a couple that were really Irish all the way through. And Ellen Agnes Jordan had a sister whose name was Mary. There's so many Marys. And Mary married Thomas Paul Langdon, Langdon, okay? And they had 5 children. And their Mary became Sister Mary Perpetua Langdon. And she is my first cousin once removed. She's closer related to me than Sister Rita is.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And she was a Springfield Dominican?
And she was a Springfield Dominican. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now, and also back in there someplace, there's a Dominican priest, Father Paul Duffner.
Okay.
And he is related on the Duffner side. His father was my grandmother's brother. John Duffner married Mahoney, I believe her name is, Mahoney. Thomas Duffner married Mahoney, and he became a priest, Father Paul Duffner, but he had a sister named Anna Mae, and Anna Mae married Clyde Cox, and they had 1 child, Sister Margaret Ann Cox, who was in our Dominican
she became a Springfield Dominican. So whether you had 9 kids, 5 kids, somebody was going to be a Dominican. All right, so we got another Springfield Dominican, Sister Margaret Ann Cox.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I understand.
But they're from she went to school in Jacksonville.
Okay, and that's where we started as Springfield Dominicans.
That's right. And Sister Augusta joined us at that point in time. And then Sister Edmund Maureen and myself and Renee came to the academy. Rather than the public schools in Jacksonville, we'd had to go back and forth. We lived in the country, so we would have had to travel back and forth to school. So we were boarded in Jacksonville. We lived here, in Springfield. We lived here, okay? And then Sister Margaret Ann went to Route in Jacksonville, okay? And Dominican background.
So we have at least 8. From that union that have become Springfield Dominicans.
And we have a Dominican priest from the Jacksonville Dominicans that taught there. He just died. He was 100 years old when he died out in California about 2 years ago. He was a novice master out there for a while.
So long line of family members, and as I looked at the data, most of them lived long lives into the 90s and 100s. Mm-hmm. Sister, was it Sister Mary Edmund lived to be 100? Yeah, that's what I thought.
She was 100. Mm-hmm.
So we've got long lineage, long life, and all through the Dominicans. Education-wise. So now, so you entered during that pioneering time in Jacksonville, those first few family members. So tell me about your pioneering once you became a Springfield Dominican and educated. You were pioneers of what schools?
In the 60s, we were opening schools right and left.
Okay, so that's part of our heritage too, is starting
opening schools
hospitals,
right and left, right.
because that was a need, and
Right.
schools to educate Irish immigrants.
Right. Well, that's not exactly where I was educating Irish immigrants, but anyhow, when we opened up St. Bernadette's and Evergreen Park, I was sent there for music and kindergarten. And then I stayed there for 2 years.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Uh-huh.
So, as the musician in a parish school, did you have responsibility for parish masses, weddings,
Yes.
funerals?
Yeah, and we had that, and I taught lessons, and the other half day. Then the second year we had 2 kindergartens, and it kind of cut down some of that. But we had the choir started, and then I left. They kept it up, and then we opened a school in Granite City, which had been operated by another group of sisters, and we took it over. And I did not have music there, but I had kindergarten, but I had morning and afternoon classes, and I was there for 2 years. And then I finished up education a year and came to Rosary High School, and I was a pioneer at Rosary High School.
Which is an all-girls
I
high
guess
school.
I was a pioneer. I call myself a pioneer because I was assigned there, but the school didn't get built in time, so they kept the kids, the freshman kids, in the old St. Holy Angel School, and then the second year I went there. There were 5 of us that started, so that year we had 2 classes, freshman and sophomore. Then we just grew up.
And Rosary started and has remained to this day an all-girls school.
Right, it was an all-girls school.
Whereas Sacred Heart Academy changed and
Became
co-ed.
I have a story on that too. But anyhow, then I stayed there for 8 years. Okay.
At Rosary.
8, 12, I forget. Anyhow, then I was appointed to Marian Catholic High School, which was already going with 1,400 co-ed schools, and I was there for 8 years. I was at Rosary for 12 years, and Marian at 8 years. And so that was not really a pioneer, but it was education where I was.
In high school. And then from Marian, which was co-ed, you came back to Sacred Heart?
I was here for a year, and then I went to Alman High School as principal for 3 years.
Okay.
Then I came back. Then, at that point, my parents were, my father was 80, my mother was 88, and they were living in the country and enjoying it. But my sister was trying to raise 4 teenagers and running back and forth trying to take care of them. So we decided, and they agreed, to move to Jacksonville. So I asked to come down someplace in this area so I could help out. My sister was wild taking care of them. So I came down and worked at the academy. But when I came, I was registrar, and I took care of registering all the records from boys' Griffin School and the girls' Sacred Heart Academy School together, and started in on computers down here. I had worked on computers at Marian and at Alman.
So you were another pioneer by starting the computer age at Sacred Heart Griffin.
Right. Well, and I started at Alman too. There were none there. And I started at Marian. They had none there.
Visit springfieldop.org. That's springfieldop, like orderofpreachers.org, and click on the Listen, See, Respond button to take a 3-day virtual retreat.
Our lifeline.
It's funny when you figure out what I started with. I lived in the country as a child, and the things we did in the country were completely different than what the kids do now. Our entertainment was like, we had a creek that went a little ways from our house. We played with the tadpoles and the frogs, and we hung on the trees. We walked the rafters in the garage, in the barns, and jumped into the hay. We fed the chickens. We picked in the eggs. My brother was the youngest, but he was late learning how to milk, so we had several cows, and that furnished our milk. And we had a garden with fruits and vegetables in it, and I used to eat the things out of the vegetables. My mother canned them and all that. So I've come from no airplanes to the moon. I mean, it's just been a wonderful experience to have gone through that much change in our nation. And you sit in fear that we're going to lose it if they don't start working with it together. You know, you just have to realize where some of us have come from peace and quiet and contentment, you know, to that. My grandmother, Anna Gugerty, she lived on the farm, and she took eggs and milk into the Dominican sisters in Jacksonville by foot, 15 miles, on horseback, or sometimes she'd get a ride in a carriage if somebody was going that way. She gathered the kids in the area, and either at her house or at one of their houses, and sometimes it was an overnight visit. She prepared all the little kids for First Communion for the parish. She prepared all the kids for confirmation in the parish.
And just so we're clear, so she was not a sister.
No.
She was just a laywoman, a mom,
right,
a neighbor who took care of the community. And whether that was...
Her sister was a religious, but she wasn't.
And so whether that was literally feeding the hungry or catechizing the children for the parish sacraments.
The other thing that she did, which I think is very notable, she was one of very few people who could read and write.
Okay, now tell me again who this was. This was your great-grandmother.
Great-grandmother. This is Anna Gugerty. Had some education in New York before they came to the country area of Jacksonville, okay? And so she would read the legal documents for a lot of the men that they couldn't understand what they wanted. She would help them write letters for things. She was the interpreter for anybody that had a problem with the language, because most of them were Irish, but there were a few Germans. Now, my great-grandfather came over here. He spoke German, but he quit speaking German, and he didn't continue to speak German the rest of his life. He kind of forgot it. By the time he died, he had forgotten it. Okay. But she carried on. She was the educator in the area.
Okay. And so with limited education, she was able to do so many things at great levels,
and
from children to adults.
I would call it social work.
And similar to our literacy centers at this point, helping with documents, helping with language. But it was she as a layperson who stepped up to help, and took the rightful place.
Right. But she died at 52 of cancer. She raised 9 kids. How she got all this done, I don't know.
Wow. That's impressive.
She's the only one that died young. Most of the rest of them were all in their 90s. On my dad's side, they were all in their 90s. She, when you think back of that ancestry, and they came here with nothing, and I've seen my father go with renting a house, a little bitty house when we were born, up to owning 3 farms. Now, that's a man that worked hard. Not big farms, but it's over 1,000 acres combined. So in his lifetime, he earned enough money to buy land and feed people, and to feed not only his own, but other people.
So that neighborhood mentality, that community mentality has been, a part of your heritage.
I think that's very important. And I think that's missing a lot of times in crowded areas and spaces in cities. It's missing. You don't know your neighbors.
And that's a huge change, that we knew the same thing. I grew up on a farm. We had the animals that were our meals, our fruits and vegetables. We grew our fruit from the trees. I swung from the rafters and played with the tadpoles. Same thing. That was our fun. And we always had something to do that kept us busy with chores, and then even our playtime. But we knew our neighbors. And if they needed help, we helped them.
Yeah, whenever we would have. Now, my father raised turkeys. He loved animals, and sometimes he would raise a whole lot of turkeys or a whole lot of pheasants or whatever for 3 or 4 or 5 years. The neighbors would come in and help him slaughter those, and then we would help. We were always part of that thing, and he would take them into Jacksonville, and they would be sold. But you can't do that now because the regulations won't let you bring meat from the farm into Jacksonville. It has to be processed in a certain place. Mm-hmm. So you became part of the family that you knew where your living came from. Mm-hmm. You knew that they worked hard to make a living for you. My mother made all of our clothes.
Yep. So they made your clothes. You processed your own food.
Right.
So it wasn't coming from county market or...
You didn't freeze it. You had to can it.
Yeah. You canned it or picked it for the day.
Yeah, that's right. And we always help with that. So I think a lot of that has to do with relationship with God, your maker, where it's coming from. You know, in the With Love from Mother book, you will see that my grandmother walked behind her father in the field as he sang Irish songs, Irish hymns. And so they sang those as they walked down the fields. So that makes an impression on a kid, you know. Mm-hmm. He was doing his work, but it was slow, and she was walking beside him and singing with him as he went through the field. Mm-hmm.
And that just brings me something I read about living community life. So as we come into today, religious life in the church. Now, just in your one history, so many women became Dominican sisters. And back in the day, as you said, they were limited. Women were limited in what they could do as a career, a profession, a call. Uh-huh. And now, the sky's the limit. And soon, the moon is the limit, because there might be a woman who goes to the moon.
But I recall thinking when I was in high school, thinking that, you know, you had one life to give, and I'm giving it to God, and no matter what He wants me to do, I'll do it, you know.
Right. So giving our life to God. And what I was reading about is back in the day when many families had large families.
Yes.
And at least one seemed to go off to priesthood or religious life. And actually families prayed for that, for one of their children.
Yeah, they did.
As an offering to God. So now, as vocation director, our numbers for the last 20 to 30 years have been 1 or 2 vocations a year. They don't come in crowds of 50 and 60. That was an oddity, and it was back then. What do you think religious life in the future will be like? Because it's still needed for the church. Living in community, praying together, giving ourselves in service to the church as educators, as healthcare workers, social workers, and now again, the sky's the limit in social justice and what we have to offer. So how do you see that playing out?
I see a lot of the high school students very interested in helping other people. They're involved in a lot of clubs and civic things where they give of themselves. They'll have a drive for somebody that's been hurt or somebody that's had a house that burnt. They're very concerned about other people. And I think in our Catholic schools, that comes from an understanding of their relationship with God and the other people's relationship with God, and they're all one unit and they want to help out. I mean, I think it's coming from a religious base, and I hope it sticks for the next generation. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it means for a religious vocation. So many of them go off and get educated in social work, which is good. Mm-hmm. And how they want to personally use that is going to be determined. I'm not sure whether they'll want to use it as a mother for children or father of children, or whether they'll want to use it as part of the church giving to the society. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be something that I can't see the future on that.
Mm-hmm. So I think even for the life of the world, as we looked at our last chapter gathering, religious life for the life of the world. So right now, where once upon a time it was needed for religious men and women to start schools, to start hospitals, to educate the children, even in
orphanages,
those who weren't in a Catholic school, orphanages, those kind of things. But now a lot of the lay people
are doing
that. And so our life as religious into the future, I think there's still a need because of our lifestyle of living simply, living a common life, praying together. I think it's still a valid lifestyle. I think it's a valid call from God, but I think it'll look different.
It's different. And it will be smaller.
Yes, and as the sisters who first came to Jacksonville in the 1800s, they didn't know what it would look like in 2021. And I think as we move forward, we don't know what it's going to look like in 2030, 2040, 2050.
Yeah.
But that we move forward in hope.
Yeah.
So coming from an immigrant country, they looked forward in hope. And I think we have to do the same right now. See the church and it moving forward in hope.
That's true. But I couldn't see the future when I came, so nobody's going to see the future. You just don't know what's going to happen. How did I know when I came at 21 what I would be like at 92?
Exactly.
Want more hope and inspiration from the sisters? Go to springfieldop.org. That's springfieldop.org.
I came knowing very little about the Dominican sisters and religious life.
Well, I knew a lot.
and I never knew any until I was an adult and came to St. Malachi's in Rantoul, where I met the Dominican sisters.
Well, see, I came from the academy, which we lived practically with the sisters. At that stage of the game, the older sisters had to walk over to the school to get on the elevator to go to the different floors in the convent. So it was we saw them. I remember walking down the sidewalk with Sister Dominica. Oh, I forget what her last name was. She was from Ireland, and she was old sister, and we'd walk down the sidewalk talking to each other. Well, that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge difference also now as opposed to back then. You lived with the sisters, you saw the sisters. That was more limited when I was becoming an adult. And now so many of our missions, literally across the nation, from east to west and north to south, we have handed those missions over to others. We've, whether that's been another congregation or the lay Catholic ecclesial ministers who are doing a great job. So,
see, we used to have, my class was a class of 65, I think it was, and 3 of us came to the convent. So, but there were 7 in my class when I came. But, and they all came from school. No, one of them didn't. They came from schools where they had sisters, Dominican sisters. Duluth had 2, Chicago had 1. Yeah.
And so as the vocation director, look at the statistics now that are coming in, the average age of joining a congregation, and they are coming. In the last 15 years, there's been about 3,500 at least make profession in religious congregations. Most of those had Catholic sisters or had gone to a Catholic education. 33%, I believe it was, which is an interesting statistic. 33% had one parent that was born outside the U.S. By God's grace, we move forward. We move forward in hope for the life of the world. That's our call.
Right.
That's our call. As we just kind of bring this to a close, Can you name for me again your family tree of those women who have become Springfield Dominican sisters?
Very good. Sister Augusta Gugerty, Sister Mary Edmund Flynn, Sister Maureen Flynn, Sister Mary Alberta Lawless, Sister Mary Renee Lawless, Sister Margaret Ann Cox, Sister Mary Rita Ring, Sister Mary Perpetua Langdon.
Pray for us. We stand on their shoulders and we go forward with hope.
Yeah. And then my grandmother was a third order tertiary. So she was a Dominican too.
But again, I think this is just a wonderful story, part of our history, and you're one of many where there are multiple, in some cases, multiple siblings who entered our congregation. Right. And then there are many relatives. So that's an important part too, as we shift to now, is for families to pray for and to encourage and invite their siblings, grandchildren into religious life.
Yeah. Well, I know there's been many sisters from some of the areas like Farmersville, Philo. They're just sisters have just come from those areas where our sisters were teaching. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the same thing with Jacksonville, Murrayville, Jerseyville, so many of those places. Neighboring towns sent many of their women into religious life.
Well, you take one road, country road, that starts on the east side of Woodson, Illinois. You got Sister Maureen, Sister Edmund. You go through Woodson, you got Sister Veronica Doolin. You got me, you got Sister Renee, you got Sister Betty Casey, Sister Elizabeth Casey, all on that one road.
Yep. That's amazing. That's amazing. Wouldn't it be nice if on 1237 West Monroe, from 1237 West Monroe to Cook Street, we got
5 kids.
Five women.
Well, see, it's a whole different yardage, a whole different thing on that street.
Yeah.
We all went to the same church. We all knew each other. Our parents knew each other. In some cases, the parents played cards together,
So that's another important part of it. It's relationship. It's relationship. Good stories. Good heritage.
Good story, good heritage. Well,
Thank
and
you very much.
I have loved being with it.
Well, thank you, Sister Denise Glazik, Sister Mary Alberta, for coming and sharing those wonderful experiences. Very educational.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
It's great to share stories.
Thank you for listening to Flowcast, where we had Sister Denise Glazik, Sister Mary Alberta, telling some interesting stories for the life of the world, and hopefully you learned something very interesting today. Thank you for listening to Flowcast. Join us next week to hear more stories about people changing lives in hopeful ways for the life of the world.